Good morning, everyone. This is Heidi, and I'm going to be doing a project for Brutus Monroe using the spiral cloud stamp. It is a background stamp. I will also be using the Brutus Monroe Pearl Embossing Powder. It is a translucent powder that allows you to see the color of the ink that you've used below it. So in this instance, I will get a silver finish because I'm using a gray Memento ink underneath it. You'll notice that my stamp set is not on the stamp background. It is a 4x6 background stamp. It is already mounted in my MISTI. Brutus Monroe carries MISTIs. He carries the mini MISTI, which would be perfectly fine for this project. If you don't own a stamping platform like this, I highly recommend it. It has made my stamping world amazing. So you'll see I'm working with a piece of vellum. I'm mounting it in the MISTI and I'm dusting it with my powder bag because papers and vellum can be staticky and also pick up oils from your skin, even if your hands are clean. Now I'm going to stamp the background stamp with the Memento gray ink. And I need this gray ink to create the silver lining effect that I'm going to get with this card. So it's a big stamp. It takes, a little bit of time to cover the whole thing with the ink. You want to do even firm pressure when applying it to the vellum. Don't push in one spot and then not others. Just a smooth pressure over the whole thing will allow you to get a good coverage. I am going to stamp it twice because I do like to make sure I have enough ink for two reasons: that it is completely covered and that I didn't miss a spot, and also to make sure that there's just a little bit extra ink to hold on to the embossing powder. So you'll see that I'm going to repress it. Again, notice that I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this. It's just a gentle pressure. Brutus Monroe stamps are amazing. They stamp beautifully every time. I've never had a problem with them personally, and I have a lot of their stamps. This is the heat gun that I use. It is a Wagner. It's got the words on it because Brutus Monroe, the owner of Brutus Monroe, is Christopher Allen, and he jokes around about it being the devil's gun in his videos when he does his lives on YouTube. So I'm going to take the paper, the vellum, out. That's sticky back paper. No, that's sticky grid paper. And I'm going to set my MISTI aside. And carefully, you hold the paper. Try not to touch the ink on the vellum because you will smudge it because it does stay wet longer. That's how I'm able to use the dye ink on my vellum. Brutus Monroe carries vellum in his store. This is me getting ready to put the pearl embossing powder onto the cloud stamp. Now you're going to see I'm going to use a lot of embossing powder, but it's okay because most of it's going to go back into the container. That's why I have the coffee filter underneath to catch what I brush off. See how the ink caught that so nicely? Now I'm going to just gently tap it off to get the excess embossing powder off. And I like to put my embossing powder right back into the container. And the reason for that is because Brutus Monroe has a penny embossing powder, which is stunning, by the way. But I left it out one day when I did my heat embossing, and I ended up blowing it all over the place. So now I'm going to heat up my heat gun, and you want to get it to the point where it's hot before you get to the vellum, because you can warp vellum. Now, Brutus Monroe's vellum is heat safe, so you should be okay with it, but you still want to be precautious and heat up your heat gun first. And you also want to move your heat gun and your vellum around while you're melting essentially you melt the embossing powder. I'm distracted by my cat. This is one of my favorite parts of doing stamping, as many others will say the same thing, is watching the embossing powder change. Can you see how I'm getting that silvery pearl finish? That's exactly what I was looking for. I was so happy it turned out the way it did. You might hear my cat, you might not. In the background, he's purring. So now that's got to cool for just a second. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to flip it over. See how beautiful that shine is? I love that pearl embossing powder. Now, when I checked, the last time I checked it, they didn't have it up on the website, but I think they said they were going to put it up before my video went up. So this is, okay, so what I did here, I'm sorry, the cat distracted me again. I have to color in around where there are not any clouds, you know, like the blue sky. And the first time I did it, I used a darker color. You can see the examples off to the sides. So I'm going to color around the outside of each of the clouds and anywhere where I want to be considered a white puffy cloud. Try not to go over the silver lines into the clouds because you will see the blue on the other side of the vellum. Something else to consider is that the ink that you put on the back, it doesn't have to be a Copic marker. I'm using B01. But if you have other brands of alcohol markers, go for it. Test the color out and then flip the paper over and see what it looks like before you actually work on your project. And that way you'll have an idea of how your markers will look going through your vellum. So continue to color all the way around all of these clouds. It doesn't really take that long. I did fast forward this for you guys. I only could go 2 times the speed, so it's not as fast as I'd like it to be. I still have a lot to learn when I do videos. So in the meantime, you'll see that I put a piece of white paper up under the vellum so I could see the lines, so you could see the cloud lines. And eventually I will move that piece of paper out from underneath the cloud because I need that purple surface in the background. It's a little soft, pliable, kind of like a thin mouse pad, or maybe the mats from your die cutting machines. You need to have something along those lines to help you. It can be any surface as long as it's a little pliable, but not too soft because you'll puncture your paper, and that's not what we're trying to accomplish in this process. The process I'm going to be doing is based on a very old, a beautiful technique called pergamano or parchment craft. Now I'm doing it on vellum, but in the 15th and 16th century they did this craft for pretty much cards based around the Catholic religion in Europe. So what you see in my hand here is a specialty tool, but you do not need that specialty tool. It's called a shading tool. I had to order mine probably over a year ago from Europe because it's the only place I could find them. Oh, I'm talking about the mat here. So anyway, you could use a bone folder, you could use a ball tool, you could use a popsicle stick. The point is to have something round and blunt because you don't want to puncture the paper to shade it. Because what I'm trying to do is basically, I guess you could say emboss it, dry emboss it. I'm manipulating the fibers in the vellum to give me the puffy white cloud finish. So as we go through, you're going to see me switch different tools and get the texture I want in the clouds. So you see this tool, try to gently push. If your hand gets tired, then you're pushing too hard and your paper will start to curl up on you. So you'll see I've moved the white paper out from underneath my vellum because I won't get the softness that I need from the purple matte. And that's a cake tool. There's the bone folder. The Brutus Monroe carries a bone folder much like that. And you'll see that any of these tools work perfectly fine for doing vellum or parchment craft. I have a tendency of calling it manipulation because that's the way I look at it. I am causing the paper to do what I want it to do, so I'm manipulating it in that way. So I'm going to put this on fast forward so you can see how it goes, but without sitting through it too long. I've been doing parchment manipulation, or in this case, vellum, on and off for the last year, trying to teach myself how to do it. I haven't spent an enormous amount of time on it, so my papers still curl because my hand gets a little heavy on it. And, you know, if I were to follow all the rules, I would have a paper towel underneath my fingers, underneath my hands, as to not get oils on the parchment paper. But, so I'm hoping this take of my voiceover goes well this time. I think this must be my 15th time doing a voiceover for it. Most of them I didn't get very far because I'd always start out wrong. So here's where I fast forward for you. Basically, you just want to keep going and try to stay within the cloud lines. And keep going. I'm really excited. If you guys don't know Brutus Monroe, the company's a really nice company. They really care about their customers. If there's something wrong in your order, they'll take care of it immediately. They make all their own embossing powders in-house. They have several clubs you can belong to. They have a stencil of the month, a stamp of the month, a mystery box, or inspiration box, excuse me. It's called an inspiration box. They have specialty boxes throughout the year. You can earn points with purchases. You can earn points when you have a subscription. They have different levels, and when you make those different levels through your purchases, you can earn more points and earn more credits towards in-store purchases. I know myself, I've earned probably $75 or $100 worth of free merchandise from them. They're so generous and they're so nice. And you can catch Christopher doing lives all the time. And if you ever have to make a phone call to the store, Heather, that works there, is amazing. She answers the calls. If you have any problems, you message them. She will personally call you about your order. It's a really nice company, and he really cares about the quality of his products. His cardstock, not your mama's cardstock, I use in this video. Oh, back to the video here. Okay, so I've gotten to a certain point where I've got to check. See how beautiful that looks? Isn't that amazing? Just putting pressure and manipulating the vellum. I'm pointing out that I have a few more spaces that I have to do. And then I want to do the bottoms of the clouds because I need I want the texture on the bottoms to give that full puffy cloud look. Now, also on the end of this, I kind of lost part of the finishing touches, but I did put a video in there, and I had to cut. This stamp set does not come with sentiments, so I wanted to put in a sentiment on the top of it. I wanted to keep it a simple, inspirational card, because clouds make me think of ethereal, and light and happy, big puffy blue cloud, or blue sky, white clouds. And I love this. I love the look of this. So I wanted a very happy sentiment at the end. So I had to go through all my stamp sets, and I know that people might freak out about this, but I had to, what I refer to lovingly as Frankenstein sentiment from several different stamp sets. But by cutting them, it doesn't really hurt them as long as you're careful to not cut the portion that's raised of the stamp, because you could damage it that way. But so just be careful, use a good sharp pair of scissors, and if you have to, stretch the stamp a little bit and then cut down the middle. And that way, when you put it back together, you're just putting the background portion of the stamp together. I'm showing you the bone folder here and how you can use the bone folder. So I don't want you to have to go out and buy extra things, tools specifically, that you don't have, just to try this project out. It's really not an expensive way to do your cards. And vellum, vellum's pretty readily available, but, Brutus Monroe has a heat safe one. So, if you don't want to go searching for a product, it's just as easy to order from him. And, he, like I said, he's a good company, and he really cares for his customers and his products and the quality. So just remember that. So I'm just going to finish up doing the rest of these clouds. Now I'm going to look at it and make sure that everything is where I want it. And now I have to trim it down to size. I believe I have to trim it down again after I trim it the first time, because I believe it's too long for my card. I had a bit of a problem with, apparently that day, with cutting, because I ended up having to trim a couple different base layers. And so I had to keep going back to the trimmer. But I think I cut most of that out, so you guys didn't have to sit through it. Okay, so here it is. That's the original size, and I love it. It's perfect. It's beautiful. This is where I took Xyron sticker maker station, and I have the 9-inch, by the 9-inch or the 5-inch one you can use in this one. This is the permanent adhesive. With vellum, if you put the adhesive over the entire back of the thing, you're not going to see the adhesive. So I like to do it that way when I can. If I can't, then I have to hide it. So you'll see I went around the outside of the parchment or the vellum and made sure all the surfaces around the outside were adhered to the clear plastic portion, because you don't want to deal with the sticky strands of the adhesive sticking to the edge of your card. It's not. Then you just take it off. You can rub it with your finger, it'll come off. But so if you, right now I'm cutting down some of his black Raven cardstock. It's wonderful cardstock, by the way. I kind of am a bit of a hoarder of it. I don't really use it that often, but since I was doing a project for his company, I thought I probably would use it. So only my special cards get this. And I have this beautiful teal blue color, which I thought went really nicely with the background. See, I have to trim down again. Yeah. It was just one of those days where sizing didn't want to work out for me. I think I get it here. I think I lost track of what I was saying before, but this tape, and this is something he carries. This is his tape. This comes in like a medium-sized pizza box, or maybe a large-sized pizza box when you order it. It's a wonderful thing. So I'm going to put 3 strips of this tape on the back of it. With his tape, you'll see that it is very sticky. So sometimes you might need to take like the tip of your scissors or a tip of a pokey tool and put it between the sticky portion of the tape and the release paper, because sometimes it's a little hard to get started, but it's completely worth it. Some people say tear the end of it so you get a jagged edge so you can pull the backing off better. But I have these scissors, and these scissors have like a non-stick coating on them, so I really prefer to use my scissors. I mean, it's not that hard to get the backing off, but sometimes it can be. Okay, so there you go. See, there's 3 strips. I'm just making sure that everything is adhering properly. Now I'm going to pull the backings off. See, it's not that hard. This last one I have a little bit of a challenge with, but that's okay. At least you can see what I'm talking about. I did end up getting it done without having any extra tools, but it was a little bit of a job. But so if you take a pokey tool, you'll be able to get that off a little bit quicker. So the part I'm talking about is that shiny part. You want to just kind of put the pokey tool on that. Now, some people don't understand why I would put wet glue on top of this adhesive foam back tape. But the reason I do that is because I get a little bit more manipulation time with my paper, because let's face it, I'm not always somebody who's going to get my paper on perfectly straight the first time. And you'll see that because I do have to readjust it when I put it on the base of my card. Not this particular portion, but when I put the black paper onto the white card base, I have to readjust it. You'll see it later in the video. I don't think I cut that out. Okay, this is not your mama's cardstock. This is very thick. This is a 110-pound cardstock. And it is another one of his cardstocks that I covet, because it's not I think you get 20 sheets for $10, which isn't bad. But again, I save it for special cards or for special reasons, like, certain techniques. But if I had my druthers, it would be my only cardstock. I love it. I just like to have large quantities. Okay, so I'm going to score this at 5.5 because we work with 8.5 by 11 size cardstock here in the United States. And so I'm going to score this at the 5.5 mark with my bone folder. No, guys, no barking. I have dogs. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so I'm going to fold this over using the edge of my scoring board, because I can get a straighter fold. Even though I put the bone folder to work there in scoring it, sometimes I still get a crooked fold. So by butting it up into the corner there, I get that nice straight corner. Okay, now I'm just going to use the bone folder again to tighten my fold, to give it a nice crease. And just in case I cracked any of it, I run the bone folder across the top, and it kind of hides any cracks that you might have done. It is a very thick cardstock. So now I'm testing the placement out. And I notice that I want to bring in the silver lining one more time on the card. So I always do a dry run with the placement to make sure it's where I want it. And this is where I realized that the card front itself is a little long. And I need, or a little wide, excuse me, a little wide. So I want to make some strips on the sides to give it that pearl finish. And it will pull into the card front for the cloud silver lining. I'm grabbing my masking tape. That's by Scott, I think. And I just pull a big piece of paper off. And I just tear it off and put it up at the top. Because I don't want to get my ink on the back part of the card. That's not where I'm trying to put it. I have to straighten it up. It's a big roll of paper tape. I think I got that off of Amazon. So I'm just lining it up with the fold in the card. So when I do the inking, it doesn't go over to the back of the card. So I'm just taking the ink pad and I'm just swiping it down the side of the card. I don't need to go crazy with the amount of ink I have on it. And because I'm doing this on cardstock instead of vellum, the ink dries faster. So I have to then cover it with, and I'm going to use Brutus Monroe's embossing ink to go right over the gray stripes. I mean, that ink just absorbed, like, it was so fast. It is, so you'll see, and I'll try to wipe up my surface in between because I don't want it to get all over my card on the inside. It's important to remember to try and keep your surfaces clean because you don't want to put all this work into a card and then have it get ruined because you forgot. Apparently I didn't put enough embossing ink on here. Or I let it sit too long. I don't usually have a problem with the embossing ink being absorbed, but I must let it sit too long. So now we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. I think I had a little fuzzy on my card. We're going to do the same thing we did earlier and pour the pearl embossing powder over the gray ink. I didn't have to worry about my powder bag being on this because even if I get embossing powder on the inside of the cardstock right there, you're not going to see it, so I'm not worried about it. See, on the masking paper I got ink on it, that would have been on the back of the card if I hadn't masked it off. So again, clean up your embossing powder, close it off, and set it aside. Don't do what I did and blow your embossing powder and melt it all over your surface. There must have been something fuzzy in my embossing powder because apparently I took another fuzzy off. It's possible when you have a lot of animals, you're possible to get a piece of hair on your projects is highly likely. So I heated up the heat gun beforehand like I did before. I'm being careful not to touch the newly melted, very hot embossing powder. Yeah, I'm kind of mesmerized by watching the embossing powder melt. Anyway, so you just want to kind of melt it all the way up, get it to the point where you've got everything. So you'll see it change color like it did in the video on your own projects. Some embossing powders you have a hard time seeing. So now I'm just aligning it. I'm using the back of the card to help align it, but I made the mistake of closing it before I glued it, which Alexandra from Hedgehog Hollow showed me a tip where if you leave your card base open you'll be able to line the top of your card up better so you can make everything nice and even. This is art glitter glue that I'm using. I bought this from May. May made it. She's another small shop owner that works with Brutus Monroe and carries some of his products. She's very sweet if you don't know her. So now I'm going to try to align it, and you'll see where I make a boo-boo and don't feel like it's aligned properly. So watch. Ready? I'm not happy. I pull it off. It's aggravating me. Okay, so now I'm using the fold because the black is going to go straight up to the top of the card and not be in the center. I've just got the two edges that have to be centered. That's why I did it that way. There. That part's done. Now you're going to come into where I'm going to have to show you a full end shot of the products that I used. And there's the saying that I had to Frankenstein. It's called, "You are the silver lining." And I thought that was a really positive thing to do. And I also used Brutus Monroe's glitter paper. Thanks for watching. Bye. Have a great day.